Tell me about Sweetwater beer. Everybody knows it. So how'd you get there?
Sure. So when you say no roadmap, I like to call it controlled chaos, aka calculated risks.
Welcome back to Leadership Highway. This is the Fast Track podcast to help you 10x your leadership, break down barriers, and most importantly, get out of your own damn way. I'm Coach McCurdy, and today we have a guest that I am so excited to bring to you. My friend, Brian Miesieski. If you may not know Brian, but I promise you, you know the companies that he's grown. Brian is the Chief Marketing Officer who brought Sweetwater from 8 states to nationwide, to acquisition by a global company, moved into cannabis, and has absolutely revolutionized how we think about marketing in the beer and cannabis industries. He's going to talk to us today a little bit about what it looks like to take a risk, how he thinks about brands, and how he handles the people who don't understand where he's taking a company. Brian, I'm so excited to have you. Welcome to the Leadership Highway podcast. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. It is a freaking pleasure to have you on the podcast, on the Leadership Highway podcast. So tell me, when we think about what we want to talk about, when I think about you, and we've known each other for a really long time, when I think about you, I think about someone who has done really, really brave things with no roadmap whatsoever to get there. So I want to talk about, first and foremost, how did you get to Sweetwater? Tell me about Sweetwater beer. Everybody knows it. So how'd you get there?
Sure. So when you say no roadmap, I like to call it controlled chaos, aka calculated risks. So there is a method to my madness, but I like to kind of fly by a left brain, right brain mentality where it might seem that I just take enormous risks and roll the dice, which I certainly do, but there's always a bit of a calculation behind the scenes there. So to answer your question about how I ended up at Sweetwater when I did, going back, way back to college when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had gone to school to play baseball. And at that time, that's all I knew I was going to be doing. I didn't know what I wanted to be doing when I grew up, basically.
Well, baseball and beer, they go together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. I didn't plan on going into beer. But, a few folks on the team, when it was time to declare a major, that I was asking around and they said, hey, we've got a great sports management, sports marketing program at Rutgers University in New Jersey, where I went. And a lot of the guys on the team, that's what they were doing as a major. So, well, that sounds really interesting. I always felt like I had a knack for marketing, although I didn't necessarily know what it was at the time. I knew I had a knack for strategy and creativity, and I would just look at different advertisements differently than I think most people are that age, I guess. And it sounded interesting to me. So lo and behold, I ended up going into sports marketing early on in my career. And pretty quickly into my career, I noticed where there's sports, there's beer. So, I worked in the agency world starting out, and clients that we ended up, having in our portfolio included Miller Brewing. It included what is now today InBev, going back, it's AB InBev now, but going back, it was Interbrew. But I got picked up right away. I had an opportunity, and I guess you could say this is the first sort of risk that I took, where I was living in New Jersey, doing well in my career and, early days. And I was asked to come on board on the client side by the brand teams that was working with our agency. So basically took the opportunity to go from agency side to client side right away and be brand manager, which required a move to Connecticut from New Jersey. It's not all that far, but
No, it's not all that far, because somehow you got from Connecticut to Atlanta, Georgia. A Jersey boy made it to Atlanta with this teeny little company that had all the potential in the world.
Right. So eventually, I decided, lo and behold, after a number of years in the beer industry, and a number of years working in the New York City area, New York City itself as well, I just decided it was time to move. I was working on the Guinness brand at the time. And this is when craft beer started to really explode. And of all the different beer brands that are out there, Guinness is among the top that craft beer was starting to eat our lunch. So part of my purview was to basically do a strategic deep dive and figure out, how do we defend against these craft beers that are taking our consumers away, taking our share, taking our volume away. And as I got a peek under the tent, I thought to myself, this is pretty cool. It seems pretty cool to be working at one of these startups that are, really on fire. And lo and behold, it's sort of crossed a time in my life where I wanted to move out of the Northeast and just head south. So I knew I was going to go somewhere probably south of Virginia. I just didn't know where yet. And I just waited for the right opportunities, to come along. Had a few contacts at Sweetwater Brewing that were, what they called it, helping it get from 8th grade to college. It was on fire in the Atlanta area and in Georgia. And they needed a marketing person to come in and say, hey, look, the next step is for us to really refine and shape our marketing, because we're going to go from what at the time was
8 states to international. It sounds like your job was to scope out how to defend against companies like Sweetwater, and instead, somehow you turned into a fan. Somehow, instead of defending against them, you actually became part of Sweetwater's defense or offense.
They sucked me in just like the brand and the beers sucked their consumers in, their customers in. I enamored by what it would like to be there, and seeing people going to work dressed a certain way and working above a brewery, and it was serious business, but there was just a different vibe about it, different culture.
So talk to me about the culture piece, because that's really important. There's an awful lot of people out there who listen to Leadership Highway. And guys, I do want to remind you, please remember, like, follow, share, subscribe, comment. Tell us what beer you like. I don't know. Maybe it'll find its way to you. I don't know. But when you think, I hear lots and lots of clients tell me that they're tired of big corporate. They're tired of the infrastructure. They're tired of the hierarchy. They're tired of people telling them what to do. And the idea of moving into startup land is really enticing. But I also think that quite a lot of people don't really know what that means and are in for a hella shock once that happens. So tell me about you. Did you have shell shock going from like infrastructure to startup land? What was that like?
Yes and no. A big piece of what I was bringing to the table was helping build the infrastructure at Sweetwater. What they needed from me to get them from 8th grade to getting an MBA, I'll say now, was basically to help them build the infrastructure, build the operation, do it like the big corporations were doing it, right? But still, at the same time, toe the line and not lose their culture. So, I think the first question that Freddie Bench, the founder of Sweetwater, asked me in my interview was, what were you thinking about when you got up this morning and you put that suit on? So I knew I was in for an interesting interview.
So that's a great question for those of you that are listening to this story and thinking about interviewing and then thinking about making the change like you did, Brian, going into the Wild West of startup. If you're used to big corporate and standard interviews and tell me about yourself and walk me through your resume, how prepared were you to answer a question like that?
It caught me off guard. I thought I was prepared A to Z with all the standard interview questions, to your point. I knew Sweetwater was going to be a little bit of the Wild West, but that one caught me off guard. It was the first question, of the day. So I didn't necessarily answer. I just took my tie off, basically. But
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
I said it's going to be one of these, huh? And just took it right off. So, so I think, I knew what I was getting into. It excited me to come and be a part of something where we had to build the new operation, build the new plane as we flew it, build the infrastructure, which was really exciting to me. I wanted to be part of something than just, being another cog in the wheel at a, big corporate, basically. So, but what they saw in me was someone that had that experience that could come help them get there. And what Freddie, I think, was trying to do in the interview to a large extent was, okay, maybe I can check all the boxes in terms of being able to be the corporate leader there, but he wanted to understand, will I fit the culture? Will I fit the vibe? Right? He didn't want me to come in there and wear the suit. And there's people that have gone there and not been able to make it because they can't sort of deconstruct, right?
I think that's really, really big. And at the risk of being crass, like when someone has a problem they need to fill with a person, the last thing they want is for someone to come in there and fuck it up for them. So, it's pretty cool that you just immediately loosened your tie. That's a bold move. You know that, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. I felt like I didn't have I didn't have an option otherwise. But, that move right there, I think is symbolic of what I had to do in the, early days, even call it 3 months, 6 months there, was just start to unravel a little bit, right? I was used to being in the office, wearing, button-down shirts and the Banana Republic pants. There's nothing wrong with that if anybody out there is wearing it, but...
That's right, folks. Wear any pants you like as long as you wear pants, right?
I think the first time I wore shorts there, I felt naked. I certainly, I had to walk a fine line. I had to be professional, but I also had to sort of deconstruct a little bit.
Did you have like any kind of like mantra or like rules for yourself that helped you figure out how to navigate this? Any big points that kept you on the straight and narrow or the curvy and fun?
So I have two answers for you. First, answer A is get busy living or get busy dying. For those of you that are, Shawshank Redemption fans, that's kind of my own mantra. It's just get after it, take chances, take the risk. Matter of fact, I have my world map here, which has that slogan on it too. And look, I had rolled the dice and decided to move down there, change everything, change my life, and go to a place that I was relatively unfamiliar with. And I said, look, if I felt uncomfortable because I had to ultimately fit this culture, it was like, look, I'm here. Let's just get after it. And I wasn't trying to be anything different than what I normally was. It was just a different environment than when I was, what I was used to from a work standpoint. But the answer B to that is Sweetwater's tagline and its brand ethos is don't float the mainstream. And it's basically just take the road less traveled. If you take it literally, it's don't drink big corporate beer, basically. It's drink all, but it's basically do everything different, be yourself, express yourself, etc. So this is the marketing in me that I said, look, I see this. To me, it's one of the greatest taglines, in at least in my opinion. And I just said, look, if I'm going to fit in here, I have to be myself and not float the mainstream in my own way as well. So every time I felt like I was a fish out of water, no pun intended there, given Sweetwater, been for fishing. But, I would just think, look, don't float the mainstream. And to be honest with you, I felt like I was more suited to fit that culture than a lot of times that I was suited to be myself, but then put on a suit and go to a corporate office. I've always had a sort of entrepreneurial, non-corporate type of vibe. Now I could do that, I've obviously gotten pretty far in my career. But look, at the end of the day, I don't come home after work and sit there and have dinner in a suit. And I don't watch TV in a suit. I don't ride my bike in a suit.
No, nobody comes home and says, oh, I think I need to put on a suit to live life, for sure. And it occurs to me that one of the things I see over and over and over again is what I call the hokey pokey at work. So, you've got this new culture that you're trying to acclimate to. So you put your hand in and you put your hand out and you put your hand in and you shake it all about and you turn around like, you can do the whole song. But if you don't step all the way in and embrace it and allow that discomfort to become your comfort zone, then you will never actually progress and become part of the organization. Right? And so I do want to take a minute to everyone listening. This is why we need you to become part of the Leadership Highway community. All of us have done a hokey pokey in our lives, in our jobs, in our relationships, in what we want for dinner. And it's conversations like these with incredible humans like Brian that help us take those next brave steps. So, Brian, I know I've thanked you. I'll thank you probably 15 more times for this, but you have a story that's really brave. Like you don't just take risks, you swing for the fences on things. I mean, at 8 states, frankly, if I were in it, I'd be like, oh, well, let's go to 12 states, but that's not what you did. That is not what you did at all.
We did swing for the fences. We went from 8 states to 50. We bought another brewery, a couple of breweries that were already existing out in Colorado and California. Ended up on Delta. So and internationally as well. So
and when you say on Delta, guys, I need you to know that if you were looking for Sweetwater beer and you were on a plane, you can get it on a Delta airplane. That's a strong growth trajectory for a little bitty company here in Atlanta where you get to wear shorts to work.
Amazing brand awareness, amazing sampling opportunity. Every single Delta flight to every destination around the world. Oh boy.
It's totally crazy to think about that. So when you think about this career that you've had and you talk about swinging for the fences, I'm curious, so on Leadership Highway, one of the things that I like to do is to look back at our career and figure out where were those pivotal moments where we took a risk that meaningfully changed something about our career trajectory. And I'm curious, clearly moving from the Northeast to Atlanta to work for a small startup craft beer company who was initially your enemy, right, is a big move. But once you were there, what do you think of when we talk about big pivotal moments that changed how you see the world?
Well, I could say, if I were to look at a few milestones, moving south and taking the risk to go to a completely new place, new industry, different, different culture, different vibe. The move I made after that was, or the next move I should say, was jumping into cannabis. So something I never thought I would get into. Sweetwater's marketed as a very cannabis adjacent beer with a 420 as the flagship, and there was the 420 festival, etc. So, we were marketing to a specific type of customer. We called it the 420 lifestyle. It was, people that loved going to festivals and being free spirited and not floating the mainstream. And what you think about when you're the craft beer consumer. We were ultimately purchased by a large public cannabis organization called Tilray, based out of Canada, because of that to a large extent, but also, where we were as a business. And next thing you know, I just started working more closely in cannabis, which I never thought I'd get into. And, the joke that I always say and still do today is just exactly what I went to college for, beer and weed. Although I am very responsible. It sounds like I'm a little off the left field.
So for all of you guys who are listening to Leadership Highway and you are still new in your career, there is a career in beer and pot, just so that you know. There can be money in that.
It's big business. You'd be surprised about the types of people that I came across in the world of cannabis. Yeah.
Oh, I totally agree. And we talk a lot about knowing your ecosystem. And so when you think about craft beer and then you start to figure out what's around that, you have really had a career that has taken one role, looked at the ecosystem, figured out what's adjacent to that, looked at the ecosystem, figured out what's adjacent to that. One of the things that you have a reputation for, and now a global reputation for, is transformational change. I hear a lot of people throw around the word transformational, and I don't think they know what that word means. And so I would love for you to share how you think about transformational change. What does that mean to you?
To me, and this is sort of my own brand DNA and what I try to do with brands that I work on and brands that I build, change, create, drive, whatever it might be. It's how is it different? How do you make this different? I've got a quote that I think I made it up. Hopefully someone else out there hasn't already done so. You never know.
You'll find out. Someone listening or sharing on this podcast is going to say, "Oh no."
Yeah. Well, it sort of riffs on Einstein's quote of what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results. Well, what I say is, what's the definition of marketing insanity? It's doing the same thing that everybody else is doing for the same people or to the same people and expecting change or better results. So basically, as a marketer, you think about what's out there today, thousands upon thousands of brands, no matter what industry you're in. And everybody is trying to connect with basically the same type of consumer, same consumer audience. A lot of times they have the same type of product, and there's ways to market brands. There's all kinds of strategic models. So they're all essentially trying to do it in the same sort of way. And the biggest challenge, and I go back to don't float the mainstream, why I love it so much, is the only way that you're going to win and push forward is if you do things different. So I try to do, when I market my own brand, that's me, I'm saying Brian is a brand.
Right. Yeah, you are definitely a brand, for sure.
Well, I'll give you some tips in a little bit about how, or the audience some tips about how, as you're meeting people or how you're going on your next journey or going on an interview, about how to go in there thinking of yourself as a brand. And you go in there and you can be able to tell your own story and, have an interview that basically talks about yourself in a way that you're selling a brand, basically marketing a brand. So it's not only Brian as a brand, but it's also the brands that I work on and the organizations that I work for. It's like, look, we can truck along and continue to go one foot in front of the other, one step at a time, or maybe take a side step here or side step there, by doing it, with the roadmap. Or you can roll the dice and do it differently and try something different and really push the envelope there. And that goes into a few of my mantras. I mentioned get busy living or get busy dying. I mentioned don't float the mainstream. But you really just, in order to get that customer's attention, that hiring manager's attention, that, CEO's attention, you have to do something different. And you have to try different things and think differently, right? So the old Apple mantra.
Yeah, no, I love that. When we think about, I think about the people who listen to Leadership Highway, and the reason that people do is because they're hoping to break down a barrier or 10x their impact or do something big, make a big shift. And when you say do something crazy, I mean, ripping off your tie in an interview is a pretty bold move, but I have to believe throwing on shorts to go be corporate is a pretty big move. But there's crazy and then there's intentionally crazy. And so when you think about you as a brand, I really do. As soon as you said, we're going to talk about how I show up as a brand, I sat up because that's a big thing. Most people out there, if you said, what is your brand, would struggle a little bit to answer that question. And most of the time, the next role is not so much about your technical ability, but about whether or not someone feels like you're a fit for the organization. And being a fit, do you then also have the skill set? So it's like they have to know you exist, they have to really like you, and only then do they look at the technical pieces about it.
And part of that brand is just who you are. It's not just what you can bring to the table in terms of your experience or your education or your intelligence and, your skill set for the job itself. I mean, who doesn't want to work with someone that they can relate to and that they can get along with and, maybe at the end of the day, have a beer or a coffee or go on a bike ride with if, you don't have to. I mean, no, not everybody hangs out with their colleagues, but you're spending more than half of your life working. Why don't you want to be surrounded by people that you get along with, enjoy?
I mean, I shouldn't say nobody. I'm sure there are people out there who do, but in general, people don't wake up and say, hey, I think I want to get a job working with people that I despise. I think I want to get a job working with a bunch of assholes. I think I want to get a job where I hate every day I go to work. That's just not what people say.
And, to go back to relate that to a question that you asked earlier, you asked about transformational change and, how do you drive change? So I've been fortunate enough with a number of different stops along the way to be asked to basically break something down and rebuild it or just build it anew or do something different. So part of the brief for me coming into some of these roles has been we need your help. We need you to change. We need so I arguably that's what geeks me out among, the set of things that I like most about taking on a new job is saying, number one, there's a problem and you're a solution, part of the solution, and you have the keys to go change this. So then it's like, all right, talk about flying without a net, but also, having the keys to do so. That's really exciting. So bringing it forward, bringing that answer forward to what you just mentioned about who you get to work with. So in a number of instances, I've been able to break down the organization that I've worked in, the department that I worked in, change roles, change the way we've done things, and then also go out and get people that I want to have around me. So I have to tell you, as a leader, obviously you want to have a great team. You want to have great people around you. You can't be a great leader unless you have great people around you as well that, become your right and left hand and your teammates. But, to be able to surround yourself with those great people that not only have the right skill sets, but also that you just want to be around. You want to feel good every time you walk into an office or, get on a Zoom call with them. It's like, look, we're in this together. We're in the trenches together on this. And, you've got my back, I've got their back, et cetera. So it's just it's a different ballgame.
For sure. So I have a question about this. So your part of your brand is I break things down and build them back up in ways that are impactful. And I do it in ways that you don't expect. But I have to believe that each time you go into a new opportunity, each time you're given a new challenge, that there will be people in leadership roles who have authority over you, or at least influence over the organization, who have no freaking clue why you're doing it, who don't understand it, who are resistant to it. And I'm curious for our listeners, a lot of times people are afraid to make a move because they think that someone won't understand it, or someone's not going to like it, or they're going to get in trouble. How do you think about those things? Do you think about them?
I do. It's a great question because it's something I do have to remind myself of, fairly often. And this goes into a decision that I'm making, a meeting that I'm in, some information that I'm presenting, an idea that I want to get across the table. It's human nature to go in there and think, are they going to like this? Are they going to think that I'm doing this right? Or are they going to disagree with me? But I have to realize two things. One is, this is why I'm in that spot. Like, they brought me in here as the expert to say, this is how we should be doing things, right? So the other part of that point is they might just not know. Like, they don't know. They might not know what you know. So because you're the expert in this area, you could tell them, oh no, the way the sky is pink over here. I'm making this up just to paint the picture. But there's a very strong chance that they're going to believe you that the sky is pink in that part of the world. Because you're the ones that
you're confident about it, and you're the expert.
Right. Which also, it's a cycle. If you express that confidence, then it comes back around and fuels that confidence when they're believing in you, and kind of, continue to build upon itself. Let it build upon itself.
I love that. All right. So for all of our listeners out there who are listening to the story and thinking, oh yeah, but what if I fail? And again, guys, I need you to follow, share, let us know the kind of things you're afraid of. But have you ever swung and missed?
Oh, of course. I'll tell you what, though, you miss 100% of the shots that you do not take. So you could play the safe route, and if that's you or anybody that wants to take the steps one foot in front of the other, that's totally fine. There's you can go on and have a great successful career by doing it that way. But if your DNA is to take some chances and roll the dice, hey, look, another sports analogy. You can continue hitting singles all day long and score plenty of runs. That's fine. Sometimes you swing for the fences and, you hit one out of the park, and that feels really, really freaking good. So that's just my DNA. And you do swing and miss. It's a movie reference here. What do you do when you fall down? You pick yourself back up and get after it again. butchered that, but it's Batman is.
I'll tell you what, it sounds like my life. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think our Leadership Highway audience are people who either are taking risks or really want to take a risk and are a little nervous about it. And so part of this community is to encourage people, if you have an idea that you think has legs, that you go for it, right? So so I'm curious, you've done a bunch of big things, and it's interesting how you went from corporate to startup and then brought that startup to essentially big corporate again. So you've kind of gone full circle. Of course, now it's corporate and cannabis, so it's a little bit different than like New York agency. But like, where are you going from there? Are you itching like to build something up with that? Like how do you think about what's next?
Yeah. First of all, I sure am itching to get out, see what else is out there. I've got this entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurial bug, perhaps, where, and it's really a restless bug, a restless spirit. I constantly want to create. I constantly want to solve issues. I constantly want to see what's out there, keep things fresh. So, yeah, at this point, I've been working for other people for a long time, other organizations, which is completely fine. I'm not saying that I'm, itching to.
I think you've done pretty well for yourself that way. So,
I'm getting, I guess, rounding third base again, sports analogy, rounding third base here in my career. I would love to do something for myself and start something from scratch that I've started that not necessarily someone else has already started. So, whether that be an agency or, starting a small business or, trying to consultant route or something like that, but I definitely want to get to a place where I'm the one steering the ship, right at the helm, and then bringing folks like me along with them. So
I absolutely love that. And for those of you listening on the podcast, if you want to follow Brian's journey, Brian, is the best way to just connect with him on LinkedIn?
For now, LinkedIn. I'm in the process of building a website and, getting IP and, trademarks and things like that together. So for now, LinkedIn, if you, just kind of follow along, you'll eventually see the transformation and some of the new information loading out.
I totally love that. And for those of you that do not know how to spell Brian's name, when you look him up on LinkedIn, you will never get it from how it sounds. So it is Brian, Brian, and then his last name, Miesieski. How did I do?
Nailed it. Perfect. Thank you.
Dang, I'm so good. Right there.
There's a pattern once you get it.
But yeah, guys, as much as I want you to like, follow, share, subscribe, be part of the Leadership Highway community, we are a community of kick-ass people, and I'd love for you to follow Brian on LinkedIn and keep up with that journey. So, Brian, we've got just a few more minutes to talk about some big things. So, if you talking to people in our Leadership Highway community who are thinking about how to 10x their careers, what would you want them to take away from this conversation?
I think it's my best advice to anybody would be think a few steps ahead. And those steps ahead, they need to be on a path that you really want to be doing, right? So you can, again, put one foot in front of the other, take the steps that you want. But if you keep going in a direction where you don't ultimately want to be, you're not going to be happy with your career. So you can, again, play it safe, but take a step to the left or to the right. See what else is a few steps ahead and think about that, and make sure that you're going in a path that you want to be. If it's whether that's an industry or a place geographically or around certain type of people, it's got to be, you're only going to be happiest if you end up being where you ultimately want to be. I go back to, one of the things that I didn't really realize, and it's advice when I'm asked to give folks in college, some advice, what can I tell them? So, and this is particularly for marketers, I look back and I don't want to say it was by accident, but it wasn't as intentional as maybe it seems when you look at my career path, which was marketing and sports and beer and craft beer and cannabis. By the way, not that I'm a big stoner by any stretch. So,
I mean, if you are, you are.
yeah.
It's working. Whatever you're doing, Brian, it's working. It's working like crazy.
But if you think about those types of products and those industries and everything that surrounds them, so take beer, for example. I mentioned earlier, there's sports, there's music, there's good people, there's sociability. Same thing with cannabis. There's music and health and wellness and, good vibes, good people. So it's not just the product, it's everything that comes around it. So back when I was looking to, make my move originally and get into marketing and making sure it was sports marketing, that led me throughout my entire career to be in industries that I can relate to and that I enjoy. And again, it's not just about the product itself, it's about everything that surrounds it. And I always, say that I'm so glad that I was fairly intentional back in the day, because where I ended up now, 25 years later, I don't know if I could have ever done this if it was pharmaceuticals or, maybe
agritech or something like that.
Exactly. Like I couldn't go to work every day, put on a suit or not a suit, do something that when I came home having dinner, my brain shuts off and I'm not thinking about, that anymore. If it was craft beer, if on the weekends I'd go out and have a couple of beers with my friends and I'm still doing my job here and my brain never shuts off. I'm constantly ideating, constantly thinking of insights and solutions. And it's so much easier and it's so much more enjoyable when it's something that you're doing that you love and you want to be thinking about it. So I don't get angry when I'm out on a jog on a Saturday afternoon and I'm trying to build a presentation in my head because it's something that I could relate to, and it makes me happy thinking about it anyway. So it's if I can say to folks, no matter where you are in your career, if you want to make the change now. But either way, map out where you ultimately want to be. I mean, that's what drove me this entire way, is forcing myself and taking the steps to where I wanted to be. I think I mentioned to you the other day, kind of corny, but I say push the universe. Just you're not going to get anywhere new and different and bold if you just keep, taking one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. I pushed the universe. I moved out of the New York area. I moved south. I went from big corporation to small startup craft beer. I went on a good ride there, made some really bold moves with the organization while we were at Sweetwater. Then I dove into cannabis, and I can't tell you, I look back and I truly feel blessed. I'm like, wow, like, if I ever thought, right now I'm in Sarasota, Florida. If I ever thought that I'd end up in Sarasota, Florida 10 years ago, and I said I'm moving to Atlanta and I'm working in a cannabis business and there's all things that are going really well in my life right now, I would have thought I was crazy if I were able to plot this.
So, but what I hear you saying, and you, again, for all of you that are listening to the podcast, I'd love for you to share, comment the kinds of things that you're thinking about. You had a goal. You had things you knew you liked to do. You had cultures that you knew were fun for you. And you had a general idea of direction, but it also just sounds like you held it loosely. Like you didn't hold on tight to every single step. When you talk about pushing the universe, one of the risks of pushing the universe is you have no freaking idea what's going to show up. So shit. But it sounds like you pushed in a general direction and then we're open to what should up next.
Well, I'll tell you this, if you don't push the universe, you have no idea what's going to show up either. So you can sit around and let it happen to you, or you can kind of, take some risks and roll the dice and maybe, look, not everything good is going to happen. There's going to be some bad things that might happen if you push the universe a little bit. But I'll tell you what, again, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So if you're stuck in a rut, if you want to change, if you feel frustrated and you're in a box, nothing's going to change unless you push it a little bit. So that's number one. Number two, I go back to the brand DNA, your own personal brand DNA. Maybe for another episode, we could build a brand DNA house together. But
let's do it, okay? For all of you listening, Brian's coming back, and we're building a house called Brian.
Shameless plug to get a second session with you.
Done.
But the way you build a brand is it's not meant to be rigid. It's meant to be open for a little bit of interpretation and an evolution, maybe a revolution. So you have a foundation, you have brand pillars, you have brand essence, you have a brand voice, you have a tone, you have a mantra or a tagline to live by. An advertising campaign. The advertising campaigns change. Like you'll see something from a soap brand one year, and then the next year there's something different that they're doing. So as long as you stay core to what that brand is all about, and it's authentic, it's meant to be a little bit open for interpretation and certainly change and evolution. So it was, when you say it was held together loosely, sure, I think to an extent, but my core is always there. It's always been there. I have the brand DNA. Again, my brand DNA, there's my pillars would be something that is, you probably gathered from me along this conversation. I'll use beer and pharmaceuticals. I'm not going to end up in a pharmaceutical organization. That's off brand.
Right. When you talk about pillars, are there specific pillars that before we have to wrap this up you want to share? Is it like, do you have like Brian's pillars for his brand?
Let's do that the next time around. But I will say this. The pillars are a mix of your own lifestyle pillars of what you like to do as a person. And then also what kind of drives and motivates you not only as a person, but also in your career as well.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Brian, you are and always have been a rock star. So for all of you on the Leadership Highway, in the Leadership Highway community, this is why you have to like, follow, share, and subscribe. This is why. Because if you want to know how to build a brand that takes you from New York to Atlanta to blowing up the world with a brand that we all recognize, then you need to come back when Brian comes back and let's talk about how we build that brand DNA. And that can only happen if you are part of our community, if you are subscribing and getting active here. So Brian, I cannot thank you enough for being here. I have absolutely loved our friendship and being able to follow just kind of like in your wake and see all the amazing things that you're doing. I can't wait to have you back to see where you're going to create chaos again. So thank you. And for all of you guys on Leadership Highway, for all of you that are getting interested in trying to change your career or take bold steps, remember, that's what we're here for. Be part of the community. Like, follow, share, subscribe, comment. That's it for this episode of Leadership Highway. Again, I'm Coach McCurdy. I need you to buckle up out there because it's a shit show and it's going to be on you to get safely to the next stop. Thanks.